Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What? Do what?
Let the dogs out. Who let the dogs out? Who?
Off the Hook, airing on offthehooksports.com. Your home for real news, real opinions, and what really matters about Tennessee athletics. Always available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, iHeart. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Always available wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Welcome to the program. We have plenty to get to today. So much for January even being considered a slow month. And we're not even going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys and the fact that they choked in the playoffs once again. I'll move beyond that, even though I'm a Cowboys fan. Got excited, made the chicken wings at home, saw it coming the whole time. And sure enough, everybody in my household went to bed depressed. But that's okay. We'll move on. Some depression maybe in some recruiting circles as Kam Pringle over the weekend, just yesterday on a Sunday, decided that he would attend the University of South Carolina. We're going to dive into that. Also, Nico's performance at the Polynesian Bowl was fantastic. I feel like everybody's waiting for him to stumble along the way, but so far he's doing everything to a really high level, and I believe it's time to get excited for him to be a potential starter in 2023, maybe the beginning of the season or after that bye week, which will head into October. I think there's a good chance he naps that job. And I know a lot of people want to say Joe Milton, Orange Bowl, fantastic. Yes, kudos to that young man. Love him to death. Sounds like a great dude. But the simple fact is, I'm seeing a lot out of Nico and hearing a lot out of Nico that I think there's a decent chance that he ends up being a starter at some point this season. So a lot to get to. Also some Tennessee hoops over the weekend. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about is get to our defensive report card is on offthehooksports.com. You can read how we grade the offense, defense, and special teams. Caleb had the, I thought, pretty easy task of giving a bunch of A's to the offense. He gave me the defense, but I handled it. I got through it. It wasn't golden, but there we go. Caleb Calhoun, how are you this morning?
I am amazing, Dave. My brother is sulking with you over the Cowboys. I, on the other hand, am apathetic to that, but more just celebrating that my Titans last week fired everybody, it seemed like, except for Mike Gravel. So, we missed the playoffs, and I didn't even want to win the division at the end. I wanted the draft pick. Forget winning the division. So
I don't blame you. The Cowboys are in this weird middle ground where they're always right there making the playoffs. They get knocked out. You never really think of them as a real contender, but they don't get the draft pick either. So it's really not that exciting. I don't know where you go with this. Of course, Tony Pollard was injured yesterday. He should have been playing more. I thought Ezekiel Elliott, for the first time all year, ran hard because he didn't have Pollard out there, and it was on him. But anyway, we've got things to get to that will certainly appeal to our audience a lot more besides the Dallas Cowboys. So let's put that behind us. 2023, it's time to make the playoffs and get knocked out as soon as possible. There we go. All right. First of all, Caleb, good morning. It was a pretty eventful weekend for Tennessee athletics in general, more than you might think so in January. And I go back to Friday where Nico Iamaleava was a part of the Polynesian Bowl and ended up getting the offensive MVP, and all eyes were on him. And it was an opportunity, if you didn't have issues with NFL Network like some of us did, to really watch him, inspect him, see his arm ability, see what he is able to do. And from a running standpoint, I think he's quite frankly going to end up being a better runner than Hendon Hooker. And I think he's going to be a better runner than Joe Milton, who, despite his athletic ability, is, I think, a little bit of a plotter. I think he runs some people over. And Caleb, I want to get your take on all of this. But I go to Nico, and I think to myself that traditional football just 10 years ago, especially 20 years ago, would tell you that Nico is going to sit for a year behind a proven guy like Joe Milton, maybe the same way that Peyton Manning was going to do the same his freshman year. Now, obviously, that didn't happen because of an injury, but my take is for the betterment of the program, why not get Nico ready? I am not ready to look at Joe Milton, say bona fide SEC starter. There's no question he's going to be fantastic. I think he made great steps. And we addressed this in a Q&A column that used a lot of your input from our YouTube channel. Please hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do that. The like button helps us bring more people into the channel. So we really appreciate that. But be sure and subscribe so you know when you get the updates. And how much better was Peyton Manning because he played because of his freshman year, even though he looked like a freshman maybe early on? I think that Peyton Manning was a lot better. And from all that I hear about Nico, he wants that type of onus placed upon him, that type of responsibility. So while traditional football says sit him, and listen, if Joe Milton's an A+ in practice and Nico is a D-, which I don't think is going to be the case, if they're anywhere close, go that route. We had a post on our YouTube message board that said, well, you could make Joe Milton mad and he could head off for his final year of eligibility in the spring portal time. And that could happen, Caleb. But let's be real frank. It is very easy for coaches to mold this as, hey, going into spring, quarterback competition, or hey, Joe has the lead on the job. You carry that right on through the summer. You don't have to announce that, wow, Nico is so good. He has absolutely destroyed any chance that Joe Milton will have to play this year, even if that's the case. You don't have to say that, and you probably wouldn't. It would be stupid to say that for Josh Heupel or any other coach that has a young player coming up and a more established player on the roster. So as far as that, I didn't get that argument that we had on our YouTube channel over the weekend. If it gets to the point where Joe Milton wants to go in April or May in that spring transfer portal opening, it's because he sees that Nico is so much better. It's not because of anything the coaches say publicly or that any way they treat their practice snaps. You have Taven Jackson out there. I think you split the snaps 50-50 in the spring, go from there. And then you see who the leader is because it's up to the quarterback to put together summer workouts. So just the more I mull over it, the more I watch Nico, the more I hear about Nico. Is he going to start the opening game of the season? That seems like a reach. But will he be the starter at some point in 2023? If I had to bet $1, Caleb, I would bet at some point he's the starter in 2023 based off what I'm hearing and what I've seen. The easy way out, Joe Milton's the guy. Nico learned. Nico doesn't seem like a sit back and learn guy to me. So that's where I am. Your thoughts, hit like. It opens us up to more people on the YouTube channel, and be sure and subscribe. Caleb, your thoughts on that?
So I'm not committed either way just yet because we do have to see how Nico performs in practice in the spring ball. We also have to see if he puts on weight. I don't think the Peyton Manning example is always the best example because I think, yes, success as a freshman can help develop you. It can also be the worst thing that happens to you because you build a little, this is weird to say, too much confidence. I think an example, 10 years after Peyton Manning, Eric Ainge came in and had a great freshman campaign season and just was not ready for the expectations that were put on him in 2005. Just a complete meltdown season that we know cost Randy Sanders his job as offensive coordinator. But then you're right, there was Casey Clausen, who starting the second half of 2000 had him ready to go in 2001. Although I think Clausen was going to start the whole season. It was a shoulder injury, wasn't it, that kept him out at the beginning of the year?
Yes, it was supposedly a shoulder injury from throwing, but he decided that he wanted to test his vertical leap, which was really, really stupid. But that's the real story. And he reached up and hurt his shoulder with the vertical leap jump, which has never been a test for quarterbacks, but he just felt giddy that day. But go ahead.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a Casey Clausen move. But yeah, so I think it depends. I mean, if I go to the NFL, I think the worst thing that ever happened to Cam Newton was the first 2 games of his career, he threw for over 400 yards each game. And he kind of did it. He kind of started to think, oh, the NFL is easy. And then his development actually slowed because of that, because he didn't realize that defenses were going to figure him out. And so I think it depends. In that regard, I don't think we know how Nico is going to be on that front. I will say this. If it's close, I'm probably with you. Go with Nico. I will say that 2023 is a year. We're talking about Tennessee football building a program, and we're going to talk in the second segment, obviously, about losing Kam Pringle. And I still think 2023 is a year where Tennessee takes a slight step back. But I don't think Tennessee can really, given their situation, given the recruiting, that it's not where it needs to be yet, I don't think they're in a place where they can afford to sacrifice games for the future. I think that's the only reason I would say go with the better quarterback no matter what, even if Nico has the future. If he's a little worse, go with Milton, because I don't think Josh Heupel or the Vols are in a position where they can afford to sacrifice games, because they have to. Everybody's excited about what happened this past year, but I think we're forgetting Tennessee's barely treading above water right now with the state of their program. Their recruiting is still not where it needs to be. The depth is still not where it needs to be. And it's not going to get to where it needs to be until after this investigation wraps up. I think the 2024 class is going to be the first class where you finally say, hey, this is where the recruiting needs to be. And until then, I don't think you can afford. I think it's okay if you take a step back, which they're going to do, I think, in 2023. I'm seeing 9-3, maybe 9-4 or 10-3. But I don't think you can afford to sacrifice a couple of games because you got the quarterback of the future. So I don't think you can afford to go 7-6 or 8-5. And if it's like the difference between 8-5 or 10-3, yeah, I think you have to focus on next year and go 10-3, because one slip up of a season, I mean, and if recruiting falters, I mean, the program could collapse. They're barely hanging on right now because of the mess that Josh Heupel inherited 2 years ago.
You know, it's funny you went as far as sacrificing games. One of our posts that I addressed on the YouTube channel it was more about sacrificing wins or sacrificing, Nico's confidence. And we have seen that happen before. Steve Spurrier did Patrick Ramsey an incredible disservice in the NFL by throwing him out there with 5 wide constantly in an offense that wasn't working. Patrick Ramsey might have been a very good quarterback, but goodness gracious, he was getting destroyed. David Carr is another one that was getting destroyed. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't take that comment into account. And I read all of your comments on YouTube, and I'm going to start with, if not daily, then pretty often features based off those, because I think you guys bring up great points. I love our community. I love the fact that you guys, compared to some others, are pretty uber intelligent out there. So the schedule is not going to destroy Nico. Let's say he starts the season, which again, I think it's more like start October. I think that's where you start getting in line for him to be able to be the guy. But if it's, and this happens all the time, I know so many coaches, and there are decisions made that in retrospect, you're like, what the H? Why didn't you do that in the first place? And Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton were a part of one of those. So I think they were very close in practice. And Caleb, you and I have debated whether or not they just liked Milton more for whatever reason when he started the 2021 season, and that Hendon Hooker was not a good practice player. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But there are times in coaching where it is 60-40, and you don't know until you get the young man out there. Well, Orange Bowl aside, I've seen a lot of errant passes, and I don't want to seem like I'm just ripping on Joe Milton, because that's not my intention. You know that. I want our listeners to know that. But I think there's an incredible upside. Now, you talked about Peyton Manning and guys get cocky. Peyton Manning didn't get cocky. He threw more interceptions in the NFL than had ever been thrown, and it helped him become a better player. I'm not saying you chuck this season, but I also think that there's not going to be a huge differential between the starter and the backup. in the case of Peyton Manning for the Colts, there was a huge difference. I mean, he threw interceptions because he was learning lessons on purpose. But the drop off, I don't even know who the backup was, would have been every bit as bad, and you wouldn't have long-term growth. So if it's 60-40, if it's 55-45, you like Joe Milton over Nico based off summer workout, spring practice, and preseason ball, I'm going with Nico Iamaleava if I'm the head coach of the Vols, if I'm Josh Heupel, because I want to build for the future. I don't see that Tennessee with Nico, with Joe Milton, with Taven Jackson, Navy Schuler. Jackson, of course, is gone. Any of those guys. I don't see them losing to Virginia, Austin Peay, University of Texas, San Antonio, and I think South Carolina is a revenge game. Now, a trip to Florida, and we'll get that whole mess that's going on down there a little bit later in the program too. But I think those are a lot of winnable games and a lot of games that you can learn and get better from, Caleb. So if it's close, I'm playing the young guy. And I used to hate that phrase.
I mean, I think personally, if between me and you, I think Nico will play too, but I think Nico is going to start in October because it's not 55-45 Joe. I think it'll be 55-45 Nico, quite honestly. I think Nico is that good. But no, I'm sorry, I actually disagree. I think you go no matter what with the better player. And if it's 55-45 Joe, go with Joe. And I say that because that 10% difference, let's look at Tennessee's wins this past year. Pittsburgh, Florida, they're close ones. Pittsburgh, Florida, Alabama. They could have lost all three of those games, particularly Pittsburgh and Alabama. I think Florida, they really had control in, but Pittsburgh and Alabama. That 55-45 is the difference between winning and losing those two games, quite honestly. And as we at 9-4, it looks a heck of a lot worse, excuse me, than 11-2. And so I think Nico's just going to be the better player. We talked about this over the weekend, and Dave, we texted, and I wanted to get your thoughts here. I think Nico is Nico's like that rare case of the perfect quarterback falling into the perfect system. Tim Tebow fell into Urban Meyer's lap out of the sky. You could not have crafted a better quarterback to run the spread option in a lab than Tim Tebow.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah,
there are perfect fits, and I think Nico is a perfect fit, which is, I think, kind of what you're getting to. Gets the ball out extremely quick, he's going to put more pressure on those safeties than Hendon Hooker is. Travis says, wow, no loyalty to Joe. Listen, loyalty, I'm never going to be loyal to a guy. Now, Joe Milton may go out there and be a superstar in practice, and this is not even a question in September, okay? So, Travis, you may be right. But as far as loyalty, nah, I have no loyalty to any of these players. And I certainly don't now that Joe probably has a 7-digit bank account, and the NIL has changed everything. John says hopefully Nico doesn't get a chance to play this year. That will mean Joe will be balling. But, guys, listen, I love our comment section, and I absolutely love the give and take. But let me ask you this. If I made you sit down and watch the body of work and I jumbled it all together and the Orange Bowl was just part of it, are you looking at Joe Milton III and saying that is a stellar SEC quarterback? Heck no. It's all based off recency bias in the Orange Bowl, and that I thought was tailor-made to his skills, which I didn't think Clemson was particularly ready for. We talked about the intermediate routes and the things he did. And, yes, he did hit on the long ball, but the bottom line is this offense is going to be predicated on hitting on the long ball consistently. And I believe right now, if we went out and played backyard football, that Nico would be better at Joe Milton than that. So loyalty, no. Travis, I want your Tennessee program to be the best it can.
Yeah, and we're forgetting this too. That Clemson-Joe Milton game was very similar. It's funny because I just brought him up, but it reminds me of the Steelers-Tim Tebow 316-yard playoff game when everybody was like, oh, Tim Tebow has figured it out. No, the Steelers played man coverage all game on Demaryius Thomas and dared Tim Tebow to beat them because they wanted to see if he could, and that reset the clock. All Clemson did was reset the clock on Joe Milton. Now teams have to be like, okay, we can't just sell out and leave the middle of the field wide open anymore. That's not going to be hard for a defensive coordinator to figure out, quite honestly. And so, okay, now Joe Milton comes into the game next year. If the middle of the field is covered, you're right, Dave. The question is, can Joe Milton hit the deep ball? Now I will say this, we saw much improvement on him this past year than we did the year before on it. He hit quite a few, even against Clemson. He did hit Squirrel White on a deep ball one time where it was accurate.
And I left that one out last week, so my apologies on that. Go ahead.
Okay. But if anybody watched Nico in the Polynesian Bowl, he had a beautiful pass to Deuce Robinson, another commit down the sideline. It was a 58-yarder. I mean, Nico's got a way better deep ball than even Hendon Hooker, who was not that accurate on the deep ball. We're looking at a guy in Nico who, you're right, Dave. I mean, you don't really have to worry about, I guess, the intangibles of figuring out the offense, because as you've talked about, all you have to do is read the safety, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so all you got to do is have the beautiful, if you throw the deep ball well, the quarterback who throws the best deep ball is the one who should start in this system. So, again, this is why I say, Nico, you had the best text over the weekend because I brought up Tim Tebow. This is Danny Warfel landing with Steve Spurrier. It's that. Except actually, it's if Peyton Manning had landed with Steve Spurrier to a certain degree.
Or in a different way, I thought, Peyton needed help on his footwork, and that was David Cutcliffe. I know we discussed that over text. Let me ask you this. What does Joe Milton right now, January the 23rd, 2023, do better than Nico, especially after what you saw on Friday? So hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Brought to you in part by Zach England of Best and Brock. Zach's got your back. Zach England is phenomenal with Best and Brock. He'll stand toe-to-toe with those insurance company attorneys, and he will get you results and get you paid, because they're going to do their best not to give you what your accident was actually worth. I promise you that. Zach England of Best and Brock. Zach's got your back. Tell me one thing other than arm strength. I'm taking that off the table, okay? It's kind of like when I play Trivial Pursuit. I take arts and literature off the board. We're not playing arts and literature. We're playing all the other ones. Other than just pure raw arm strength, I can throw it through a brick wall. What does Joe Milton right now do better than Nico based off what you saw? And I've watched a lot of tape based off what you saw on Friday and what you think he will be by August.
There's one thing I would say, but it's so minuscule that it wouldn't win Joe Milton the job, which is, I know you said Nico's faster. A lot of Josh Heupel's designed runs for quarterbacks are north-south runs, and Joe Milton, I would assume, is a better north-south runner just because he's so much bigger that, Nico is going to have to be a horizontal runner, basically. He's not going to be able to do some of those runs that Hendon Hooker can do yet. He probably will in a year, but he's not going to be able to do those runs by next year.
Travis hinted at one, which is the same thing you're saying. No, he's not going to truck some incredible defensive lineman in his freshman year, but he may never do that, okay? But what he is going to do is have better speed on the outside, and I think he's going to be a better natural runner. And I know Joe Milton is this physical freak and everything, but I see him, Caleb, as a straight line guy that he's going to truck you and might outrun you. I see Nico as a more elusive guy when he is out there, and I don't think this is going to be that close. I think when it gets to August, it's not going to be that close. I think it's going to be Nico's job. And whether or not you want this to be a factor, and God, I hope it's not, because I absolutely love college football, and it's getting too businesslike for me. There is a monster NIL deal that is going to have to be satisfied at some point.
Yes, there is. That's a good one. But, again, I don't think the NIL deal is not satisfied if Nico sits behind Milton for a year and then starts in 2024. I don't think the people who threw that money at him are going to be that upset. They just want to make sure he eventually does start. But you're right. Nico's ability, I guess the best way, guys, I'm not saying he's this quarterback. Do not accuse me of doing this. Please, no commenters, don't accuse me of this. I am saying that his mobility reminds me a little bit of prime Aaron Rodgers mobility, where it's more able to horizontally move in the pocket and can run when needed. He's as opposed to trucking guys. And so I am with you with that on Nico.
Well, and he keeps his eyes downfield.
Yes.
The thing. And I thought Hendon Hooker at times was guilty of this, and it's partly because of the way the offense is built, and that is you want to read that safety and make sure you get that read right. But I thought there were times with Hooker, and I think there are going to be times with Milton. I've already seen some of it where it's kind of stare down your receiver. Now, that's part of the offense, and I get all that, but I'd be careful with that. And I just think Nico is not just based off what I've seen Friday, but based off a lot of the things that I've heard. I just going to tell you, I'm not surprised if he starts in August. I would be surprised if he doesn't overtake Joe Milton by the end of August, and they have that. By end of September, and they go into that bye week in October. I'm just telling you how I feel. And listen, I may be in the minority. I haven't talked to other reporters about this. These are my thoughts. Ryan said, Dave, you're way ahead of what's going to happen. Joe will start and finish the season. Nico will redshirt and take us to the promised land. Ryan, buddy, I love you, man. I love you for being on this show, and I love your input. And most people agree with you. But I'm going to stick by what I said. And if I'm wrong, I've still got some Hooker T-shirts laying around. You hit me up, and I'll take care of you. And listen, I say all this as a good thing for those that are like, "Oh, Dave's saying Joe Milton can't play." I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying I think Nico is going to be the better option.
You also have to remember, though, that look, there's going to be a bias with Heupel to Joe Milton. Whether or not a coach should do that or not, he convinced Milton to stay. Milton stayed around. He already was preferential to Milton, and I think he thinks it's worth it to start him this year because of Milton having the locker room. And also there is a coach credibility thing that I do think becomes a factor in recruiting. I mean, we know that there were – look, we talked about it, must have been 2 weeks ago, just from the perceived unfairness to CJ Leak. Fulmer lost out on Chris Leak in 2004, 2005.
Well, and CJ Leak is a very similar player to Joe Milton, quite frankly. They both have heavy feet. They both have a labor delivery. I thought about that over the weekend, too.
Yeah, and cannons for arms. But because CJ Leak had a cannon for an arm, too, I think.
Would you rather have the guy that's light on his feet and can move around and can read a defense better? Travis says Dave's still in a bad mood from last night. Travis, I'm not. I think this is a good thing for Tennessee's program. I can't understand how this is being taken. Why is this being taken as a negative, Caleb? I'm telling Tennessee fans, you have a player that is so special based off what I've heard, and I talked to a lot of people, and based off what I saw on Friday night, and I know that's high school competition, I'm just telling you, you already knew you had something special. Are you just going to sit there and let it sit under the Christmas tree when everybody's giving you a hint and wait for 2024 to roll around? To heck with that.
I mean, no, I'm with you on that. Look, like I said, Nico, when we talk about quarterbacks created in a lab for a system, you would think Josh Heupel created Nico in a lab and then recruited him because he's literally designed to run Josh Heupel's system more than any quarterback you will ever see. I mean, I'll go out and say it. Nico is going to be the best quarterback Josh Heupel ever had at Tennessee. There's not going to be, no matter how long Josh Heupel is at Tennessee, there is not going to be a quarterback that's better than Nico was at Tennessee because I've seen enough film and I know Josh Heupel's system. You don't get quarterbacks like that can run that system that well. And the system's easy to run, but it's easy to run, and then it's tailor-made for Nico's style of play. You're going to see by the time Nico's career is done, every Peyton Manning record is going to be broken at Tennessee. I'm already saying that now, but that doesn't mean I don't know if that means he's going to start this year.
I like what David said. I like Milton, but whoever wins the job. Amen. I'm sorry, Tennessee would have been pretty good with Brandon Stewart if they picked him over Peyton Manning, which was a real debate at the time. It was 60-40 Peyton. Okay, I mean, there was a real contention out there that wanted Brandon Stewart. They made the right call. It was a choice between two good options, and I think that's where Tennessee is right now. But I believe the better option by October will be a man named Nico, not Joe.
Quick hot take. They also made the right call doubly because Brandon Stewart then went to Texas A&M and saved them from having to play Kansas State in the national title game in 98, who Tennessee would have lost to. Not because Kansas State was better talent-wise, but because John Chavis was a deer in headlights defending the triple option.
Sam said it can only be proved on the field. Right now, it seems like speculation to draw viewers. No, that you don't know my career, Sam. I'm just going to tell you what I think. I'm going to tell you that Jeremy
Arrogance right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's me. I'm just going to tell you that Jeremy Banks should have been asked to leave the program, regardless of whether or not he wanted to return. Maybe that's unpopular. I mean, I'm not trying to drive viewers. I've never had a problem with that because I tell you what I think, and I'll tell you if I'm wrong in October. So, nice try, Sam. We've seen that before, but that's not the direction I'm going. AndyMasonRealEstate.com is where you need to go. Over 40 years of real estate experience in Knoxville. AndyMasonRealEstate.com, and they have the best service. They have the best prices. It's just that simple. And they absolutely know how to market your home, get it sold. I know the market's getting a little weird. It's changing a little bit. That's why you need AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Just fill out the easy form, and you've got Knoxville's best realtor, hands down. Now, Sam, you did say one thing I totally will agree on, and that is it can only be proved on the field. Yes, but it can be proved on the practice field, and practice is closed. So we're not going to be able to offer you that insight like we could back in the dark ages. David said, I like the people reporting the truth, not what I want to hear. Well, I hope you like that. I actually thought most people would say, go, Dave, go. Nico's the guy. I thought that would make me more popular. So that shows you how poorly I read the audience. I'm just sharing what I think, Caleb.
I think usually you support the younger guy, but there's an emotional respect that many Vol fans have for Milton for staying around, and sometimes emotions get the best. I'm a Memphis Grizzly fan in basketball, and I will never forget Grizzlies fans would always want to draft the Memphis Tiger players because they loved them in basketball, and I'm like, guys, they can't play in the NBA. Stop trying to go for them. They're not going to work. But the emotional connection.
We'll wrap up with this before we get to Tennessee missing out on Kam Pringle and why I think that's not the end of the world. Travis said it's just a scary thought. 18-year-olds seldom work out. I agree.
Trevor Lawrence? Anybody?
Yeah, who probably sat the bench too long.
Yeah.
I know Cam Newton had junior college, but that was his first year and he won a national title. But do you think Tennessee's going to win a national title? Now, listen, I go back to the Rick Clausen, Eric Ainge debate. Rick Clausen was a better fit then because he did have experience and he could just dole the ball out to different people. Eric Ainge, though, everybody fell in love with his ability, and I get that, but I just, no offense to Eric Ainge, but I think that Nico, from what I've heard, is a lot more stable right now, and I think he's ready.
And we don't want to go. Yeah, and you never want to go here, but you're right. Eric Ainge had some demons he was fighting at Tennessee that that Nico doesn't seem to be fighting.
Yes, and I will be the first to say this for somebody that thinks I've got something against the Milton family. If he wins the job and leads Tennessee to a 10, 11, 12-win season, national championship, I think that's one of the coolest stories in the world. Dave's in it for content, okay? So I think there are two great stories. I think there's the guy that stuck around forever, even when he could have transferred, and I think there's the freshman out of nowhere that lives up to the billing. Those are the two things Dave's rooting for, and I really don't care which one it is. I'm just telling you what I think right now. So, I mean, I'm rooting for content, Caleb. 3 minutes. What's that?
I'm with you. And look, there are sometimes great stories. Look, T. Martin could have transferred after Peyton Manning decided to come back in 97. And T. Martin will tell you to this day that was the best move he ever made, was staying and sitting behind Peyton another year. He said that's what had him ready to play in 98.
Yep. Zool Beer Company is the official craft beer of Off the Hook Sports. XULbeer.com. If you're on our audio platform, check them out. Zool Beer Company, worldwide award-winning craft beer, and you have parking downtown. It's awesome. Back in 3 minutes, and why Tennessee shouldn't fret losing Kam Pringle and perhaps another former commitment, is heading to the Gamecocks. 3 minutes more after this off the Hook Sports.
Family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
Inflation has risen to the highest level in over 40 years, according to the April 2022 U.S. Inflation Calculator. Will your investments provide you the income you need in retirement? Are you losing purchasing power of your savings due to inflation? Simply stated, if the cost of goods and services are 8% higher and you're only earning 4% in your investments, that money buys you less of what you need. Right now is the time to act. Call Guardian Investment Advisors today.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here. I want to personally invite you to North Knoxville's newest sports bar and restaurant.
It's Big Orange Phillies, located in Black Oak Center. And yes folks, it's happening in Halls. Big Orange Phillies offers family-friendly environment with homemade meals and the best deli-style subs around. Billiards, darts, jukebox, shuffleboard, and cornhole, and a full bar. We also offer valet parking on weekends and during special events. We even have a covered back patio. It's happening at Big Orange Phillies. We want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Chattanooga, we're at it again. For the 5th year in a row, you voted us best of the best criminal and DUI law firm.
And finalists for best law firm and best personal injury firm.
Thank you for the love, Chattanooga. We won't let you down.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Welcome back. Hit that like button for me, please. It helps bring more listeners in, and that's what we want to do. We want to really grow this thing. We're excited about a huge monster edition next month.
We got a better future than the Cowboys here. Sorry, Dave.
I'm going to take Caleb off the screen now. Close out the remainder of and I think we're going to go a little bit long today, which is fine because we've got a lot to talk to about. No, that's fine. I mean, I'm so used to it. I mean, do you know what it feels like when they say the Cowboys haven't been to the NFC Championship game in 30 years? I remember exactly where I was. This is before cell phones. My best friend was a 49ers fan. This is 92. And we called each other on landlines to the point that my glasses are good. That they called. Our parents said, "Stop! You're tying up the phone." This is how long ago that was. I mean, I think we started faxing each other at one point. That's how long. And I remember that as being one of the greatest. I didn't care if they won the Super Bowl after they beat the Niners. Really, and that you remember that muddy game that in the '92 NFC Championship game. You were 10.
I wasn't 10. I was 4.
Oh,
yeah. Sorry, Dave.
Go back and watch that game. That's classic I-formation football, and you would love it.
It was this whole. I've studied the Cowboys offense. It was the simplest offense ever because y'all were so loaded on the offensive line. There was not a lot of complexities.
And I believe there was a 3rd and 6, and instead of just trying, no, it was first down. They Cowboys got the ball back. They had about a 4-point lead. And what did they do instead of just running out the clock? They threw a slant route to Alvin Harper, former Vol, and he took it about 76 yards down to the 4-yard line. And it was the gutsiest call because there were like 4 minutes. Run out the clock. Give it back to San Francisco. Also, the day before that, Jimmy Johnson said, you can go ahead and quote me. We will win the game. Nobody does that anymore, do they?
In the NBA, Rasheed Wallace did it about 16, 17. The year the Pistons won the finals in 2004 with Ben Wallace. They played the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals, and he's like, they're not winning game 2. I just tell you right now, they're not winning game 2.
Good gracious. You also brought up the Grizzlies. I'm sure you saw that John Morant dunk from last year.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I love sports, and I'd love to be a professional basketball player. If somebody dunked on me like that, that might be it. I might just retire. Right at that moment, I would say, I'm good. I mean, he brought that ball so far back, and his head is at the rim. Just when we think that you can't see, that's what I love about sports, is non-scripted. That's why I hate gambling on sports. Not us, not you and me, but like the Pete Rose thing, because it's so unscripted and so beautiful. I never thought I would see Brett Maher, who was a great field goal kicker the whole year, cost the Cowboys a game last night, which essentially he did because they were afraid to kick one field goal, and he missed an extra point really poorly. It was blocked, but he was going to miss it. So that's your 4 points right there. I never thought I would see that, and he missed 4 the week before. I never thought I would see somebody take Kobe Bryant's physical ability past what Jordan was, and he did get higher than Jordan. And now John Morant, I think, is getting higher than those dudes. That dunk was insane. I quit right there. At that moment, I retire. I take my pension. I'm like, the game is at another level. I don't know who he dunked it on, but I'm done, Caleb.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been saying hot takes recently that John Morant he has a better vertical than Michael. And I think because I think the underrated story with Michael in the 80s was Michael was uniquely athletic for 6'6". Am I right? He was uniquely quick.
Yes.
And I think Josh's quicker than Michael. I don't think he's going to be better than Michael, guys. He's not going to be better than Michael because he's not 6'6". He's 6'2". But I still think as far as athleticism, he's got Michael beat in quickness and vertical and hang time.
Totally agree. I think that Michael Jordan was very, very good in everything. I think that Kobe Bryant was very good in everything. I don't think that they were the greatest jumpers in the world. I don't think they were the greatest ball handlers in the world, but they were in the top 95 percentile of everything. That makes sense.
I would say Michael was the greatest at finishing at the rim. I watch highlights, and I've never seen somebody to this day that was so good that once they got to the rim, and his mid-range too. His mid-range was insane.
Well, you know who's right up there is Kyrie Irving, and I take Earl the Pearl Monroe back in the day.
Okay.
But we are talking about being in the top 95 percentile, so that's kind of what I'm saying. If you're in the conversation of everything, and he ended up being a great three-point shooter, but I digress. I think that Nico's going to do that as well. So over the weekend, I'm going back to that. Over the weekend, we were all watching Kam Pringle. Kam Pringle, I felt like a month ago, let's say 2 months ago, was a Vol before the South Carolina game. Offensive tackle out of Dorchester, South Carolina. I thought that guy was a Vol. Had a weird feeling, got a little tip. He's going to end up at Tennessee. Mizeo Bennett out of South Carolina, another 4-star prospect wide receiver, was committed to Tennessee. So what has happened? What's the common denominator between those two players who are out of South Carolina, who I thought mid-November were both headed to Tennessee? What's the common denominator between those two players, Caleb?
They went to South Carolina after South Carolina beat Tennessee.
Thank you.
No, you're right.
I like to say that one game doesn't matter, and it usually doesn't. But in this particular case, I think it did. I think winning not only the Tennessee game, but the Clemson game, I think helped South Carolina. Now they have 4 of the top 7 prospects in the Palmetto State, and they're going to have a little short-term run of success. I'll still say this, and people may get mad at me about this like they did with Nico. I do not think Travis says Dave hates Milton. Tell your friends. No, I don't. I do not think that Shane Beamer is a good coach. I think he's surrounded by bad coaches. Okay. I do not think that they're going to have long-term success. And if not for Tennessee deciding not to show up and Clemson blowing the game late, I think that's where we would be. And Kam Pringle would not be going to South Carolina, and Mazeo Bennett would not eventually be going to South Carolina. I'm told that's where he's going to end up. But Caleb, I have reason for optimism even after that decision by Pringle and what I believe is a pending decision by Mazeo Bennett. Would you like to hear that?
I'm ready. Shoot, Dave.
Okay. First of all, hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed. If you're Kam Pringle or Mazeo Bennett, and you grew up loving South Carolina, or you grew up loving Clemson for that matter, and you commit to one of those schools, and I believe Clemson is trending down, but in a much better place than South Carolina. I believe Shane Beamer's hit his peak, and then he's going to start to trend down. That's what I believe. It's what I've been told by a lot of coaches. They can transfer after a year. It's not like it used to be, Caleb, where you sign with somebody and you're tied in. You can't get out. If they get there and they realize it's buffoonery, which I think they will, you can transfer to Tennessee, Clemson after a year. Let's be honest, most prospects, no matter how good they are, do not contribute at a high level when they're a freshman. You can bolt. Let them go. Let them try it out. Let them try the mustard barbecue sauce in Columbia. It's delicious. But why else live there? I have no earthly idea. You pointed out how the tailgating is so horrible there. The facilities are nowhere close. That's the thing that befuddles me, how some of the mid-level, and listen, South Carolina is a mid-level SEC program. I don't get, Caleb, how they convince some of these prospects, and it may be NIL money, to go to a South Carolina that's a mid-level program with okay facilities as opposed to a Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia that have elite facilities. But they did. The point is, don't lose their phone number. Don't get caught tampering, but don't lose their phone number because they might be strolling back your way in a year.
Yeah, so I understood it when Steve Spurrier was there because Steve Spurrier had instant credibility and was already an SEC legend when he went to South Carolina. I think South Carolina at the time understood because they hired Lou Holtz before that, open up the checkbook for the big name coach and see if he'll come. And, you know, Spurrier and Lou Holtz were 2 unique coaches who liked, would you say, projects? They loved taking on projects, basically. And I think outside of that, you're right. It's a little bit tricky to see why they would do that. I just pulled up South Carolina's schedule, and Dave, I think you're right. And one of the reasons I think you're right is South Carolina, things don't start off that easy for them. I mean, they start the year off playing North Carolina and Charlotte. North Carolina just played for the ACC title. I mean, North Carolina might be favored in that game. And then they have Furman. But then they go to Georgia. They're losing that. You can circle that as a loss. So they're probably starting 1-2. And I think you and I know this with football. I actually disagree with you. I think a lot of football narratives and history is written because of one game changing everything. But
in recruiting, do you?
I think in recruiting, I think in credibility, I think in I think in so many different ways. I think one game changes everything. Look, we talked about it over the phone last week. If Chuck Smith doesn't send 13 men onto the field or 1,800 defensive linemen onto the field against LSU in 2010 and Tennessee wins that game, What do you think that does for Tennessee recruiting in 2011? I mean,
Game changer.
Yeah, total game changer. I think that, don't get me wrong, LSU had the number 1 recruiting class in 2001, that Nick Saban's second year there. But let's be honest, beating Tennessee in the SEC championship game, that probably did a heck of a lot for their 03 recruiting class. That did wonders. And also that, I mean, we don't even need to talk about how that set Tennessee on a downward spiral that they, to this day, haven't recovered from. And so I do believe that. I think with South Carolina, where I think matters is that I also believe that with momentum, you can get worse as the season goes on or get better. I think we saw Tennessee this past year. One of the reasons Tennessee was so good was because they cashed in on, I think we would say, a relatively easy schedule to start the year. Their 3 Power 5 programs were a Pitt team that had a new quarterback, and then Florida and LSU, who both had new head coaches. And they got LSU at the perfect time coming off a bye and a noon game show. Basically, a bunch of things went their way to help them build that 5-0 start. But once you build it, you got a lot of confidence then. You can carry that momentum. South Carolina, it's the reverse. You're talking North Carolina at a neutral site. That's really a home game, I think, for North Carolina, Bank of America Stadium. Then you're talking at Georgia. So I think you're looking at 1 and 2, and you could really see the program start to reel at that point and fall off a cliff.
Sam says, don't know the names, but South Carolina had a lot of good players hit the transfer portal this year. So let's go through a couple of those real quick. Jaron Willis is an edge rusher, 4-star from Ole Miss. Sidney Fugar somehow has 0 stars. I've never seen that before, but he's from Western Kentucky. So I don't know. He's going to change the course of the Gamecocks. Joshua Simmons is a 4 or 3-star, depending on who you ask, from Western Kentucky. Trey Knox from Arkansas, 4-star. Let's go back to their recruiting rankings. They need to reset these rankings, by the way. I mean, that's something maybe you and I can take on if we have that much free time, but we don't. Nick Elkness, tight end, goes from Florida to South Carolina. Florida's a dumpster fire. Nick Gargiola is a offensive tackle who goes from Yale to South Carolina. Mario Anderson Jr. is a running back who had no stars that just goes to South Carolina. We're not really sure where he transferred. So I wanted to run that down because you brought it up, Sam, but I would just go ahead and tell you that doesn't blow me away at all. Yeah. Those group of dudes sounds like you need literally personnel like Tennessee was 2 years ago. So it was take whoever you can and then run them off if you don't like them. And there are a couple of guys in Tennessee's transfer class, and I'm not going to name names right now because I hope I'm proven wrong. But I can tell you there are a couple of guys that aren't players, and they're going to get run off at some point. That's college football. That doesn't mean Josh Heupel's a bad dude. Doesn't mean Shane Beamer's a bad dude. That's college football.
And it doesn't help that Shane Beamer embarrasses himself a lot. I actually agree with what Travis just said. Shane Beamer acts like a child. If you guys followed his recruiting war that he started with Maryland last month over losing, I'm forgetting the player. I'm looking it up right now, but Jay-Sean Barham flipped from South Carolina to Maryland, and Shane Beamer started. He subtly took a shot at Maryland's attendance, which is fine. Yeah, Maryland does not have good attendance, and they should be embarrassed for it. But then on top of that, like, I'm pretty sure he was behind South Carolina, like the city of Columbia, having those signs out, like trolling Maryland for their attendance records in front of restaurants and things like that. And I'm like, you guys are doing this over losing one player who went to his home state school, and you're doing this to a school that, like, is not that much of a football school. Why are you starting a war of words like this? And that level of culture is a little bit sad to me, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, look at the great ones. I mean, any team that was in the college football playoff, do any of those dudes act like that?
No, not at all. None of them act like it. I mean, like, and it's funny. Like, you hear coaches take shots. Like, I remember Nick Saban took one at Jimbo Fisher last year. Steve Spurrier was a master at doing it, but most of those, like, they're speaking at booster meetings and then the audio leaks out and they didn't plan for that to go public. You know what I mean? They weren't trying to publicly start a war of words with another program. Like, Shane Beamer's trying to publicly start the war of words.
A little bit with Steve Spurrier. I can tell you in the 90s that he always called John Adams and had with the week of the Tennessee Florida game and had an idea for John Adams for a column and thought, here's an exclusive interview if you want to do a column. And there was some Citrus Bowl jokes thrown in there. So
maybe that was gamesmanship, though, knowing that he could.
It was.
Look, let's be honest. He got into Fulmer's head. Spurrier was in Fulmer's head in the 90s, and there was no question about that.
Well, I'll go down a real quick story. You remember Mondre Dickerson?
Oh, yeah. I remember Mondre Dickerson.
I interviewed him. I said, is there any difference between the coaches in Florida week and other weeks? And he said, yeah, they get real tight. And I was like, you know, so, I mean, it was out there. Everybody talked about it, but they didn't want to actually admit it. Yeah, Sam, getting back to your point, I think that South Carolina brings a lot of players in because they need more players. But there's no question that Tennessee is trending up and South Carolina is based off what they did in the last two games and a close game in the bowl game. They're treading water. Maybe they're swimming a little bit ahead, but which would you invest in if they were on the NASDAQ? I mean, Tennessee or South Carolina?
Oh, Tennessee, easily. Wouldn't even think about it. And that game. But again, the other side is you say a short-term run. You know this, Dave. Short-term success run can turn into long-term success if you play your cards right with recruiting. Hashtag Dabo Swinney and Clemson.
It's true. I think Shane Beamer has to walk into an elite coach's office at some point and say, hey, I want to hire you. Or I guess the elite coach would walk into his office. I want to hire you. I think you're something special. Like maybe there's a young Sonny Dykes out there. You know, like Tennessee should have hired Gus Malzahn instead of Dave Clawson. Maybe there's a young guy out there that's running an offense like that, or something along those lines. I need a quarterback whisperer for Spencer Rattler. But I think a lot of those coaches will turn them down because, again, the Steve Spurrier thing when he was hired at South Carolina, a big part of that was to generate revenue, every bit as much as winning games. It was to generate revenue because their weight room was an extension of the stadium. I mean, I don't know how many of you all have driven around UT's campus lately, but they have like 1,500 buildings, okay? And the weight room is not just a side closet for working out next to Neyland Stadium. It ain't like that. I mean, it's way different. The Pratt Pavilion, goodness gracious, I remember when the weight room for the basketball players literally was right next to the court, and it was no bigger than a 20 by 20 foot room. It had the basics. They lift, and then they practice, and that was it. Now you got a Pratt Pavilion. I just don't see how you walk on a lot of these campuses and compare the two facilities compared to a Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia. So I want to ask you this because you're a gambling guy. Give me the odds. Okay, let's assume that Zayo Bennett commits to South Carolina, which I think will happen. And if you don't know him, he is a really, really good football player that I thought 2 months ago before South Carolina got hot. He's a wide receiver, 4-star. I thought he was Tennessee bound, no doubt about it. So let's say, because everybody's predicting him now to South Carolina. Let's say he commits to South Carolina. You give me the odds, because you're the gambling guy. We've got a gambling show we're going to introduce here, hopefully by the end of the week, but next week at the latest. You give me the odds that one of those two players ends up at Tennessee after their freshman year.
After their freshman year?
Yes.
I'm going to say I think the odds are actually greater than 50%. I'm going to say over 50. And I'm going to say why. I'm going to tell you guys exactly why. You're right. Both of them wanted to go to Tennessee. The South Carolina game changed everything. I wouldn't have said that if Marcus Satterfield were still there because he kind of figured out how to use Spencer Rattler at the end of the year. But then Shane Beamer went and hired Dowell Logains. Dave, do you have any faith in him as an offensive coordinator whatsoever?
No, and give us a little more background for those that don't know those names.
Okay, so Dowell Logains was the tight ends coach at Arkansas in 2021 and 2022. Just so you guys are aware, his most recent job before then was offensive coordinator of the Jets. Yes, offensive coordinator of the Jets. Before that, 2018, offensive coordinator of the Dolphins, offensive coordinator of the Bears in 2016 and 2017, quarterbacks coach of the Bears in 2015, quarterbacks coach of the Browns in 2014, offensive coordinator, here we go, y'all get ready for this, offensive coordinator of the Titans in 2012 and 2013. Guys, everywhere he's been has been a failure. Every single place. I just named like dumpster fire of franchises.
Well, and who in the heck would leave a program that is supposedly up and coming like South Carolina is supposedly doing, right? Okay, that supposedly that's what they're doing right now, because 2 big wins at the end of the season and a close bowl game. So supposedly if they're on the rise and you have a young quarterback to work with, why would you leave? That's red flag number one.
Which Marcus Satterfield did, yeah.
That's a monster red flag.
Particularly when he left for Matt Rule in Nebraska. And we're all agreeing that Nebraska is a program that may never be able to get back to where it used to be. So you're right. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, it's just it's never going to be that way. Guardian Investment Group is able to use video teleconferencing, which is phenomenal to give you the best service when it comes to your personal investments. Go to GIAplantoday.com. GIAplantoday.com, and Guardian Investment Advisors is phenomenal in not only telling you where you should put your money, but why. So what do we got coming up next? We had another hot topic that I was excited about.
Oh, defensive report card, Florida.
Oh, yeah, we got a defensive report card. Caleb puts all of the onus on me from the report card standpoint. He's doling out A's left and right. I've got Tennessee football players calling me all hours of the day saying, why did you give me that grade? That's probably a slight exaggeration. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. More after this 3 minutes off the Hook Sports. Campbell Cunningham and Taylor and Hahn. Campbell Cunningham, Taylor and Hahn. Local iVision service right there in East Tennessee, and they care about you, not some fly-in doctors. 3 minutes, and then my report card on the defense, which ain't great. And I'm not doing it just to stoke people and get more viewers. I'm just telling you what I think. Stay tuned. 3 minutes.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center. Ah.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here, Viles Automotive on Calhoun Drive. I've been selling cars here in East Tennessee for 27 years. In that time, I've come to realize it's not about the car. It's about you, the customer. So I'm here to take care of you just like family. Good credit, bad credit, you name it, we can get you taken care of. If we don't have it, we can find it for you. We go across the country to get any vehicle that you want. And here at Viles Automotive, we don't believe in fake numbers. We just give you great deals. And as always, we want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Chattanooga, we're at it again. For the 5th year in a row, you voted us best of the best criminal and DUI law firm.
And finalists for best law firm and best personal injury firm.
Thank you for the love, Chattanooga. We won't let you down.
Our family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
Welcome back. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. So want to get right into this, the defensive grades. You can go to offthehooksports.com to check that out. And do want to welcome a brand new advertiser to the program, a brand new sponsor that we greatly appreciate, Rick Terry Jewelry Design. You just heard from him. And I want to tell you about Rick Terry for just a second. Rick Terry, it's family owned, and they're based right there in Knoxville. And the thing about Rick Terry that you want to know, they design the jewelry. They're able to use the 3D printers, which still pretty much blow me away that's a thing. I've watched it done, and it's phenomenal. So you could look at a ring, you could say, that's the ring I want, and they literally can design it from a picture. I mean, it's phenomenal. Or they can certainly take the jewels that you have in a current ring and change them around and design it. It's not like showing up to just a chain store. It is absolutely phenomenal. So we certainly want you to check them out because they are unbelievable. And all right, so Sam says, I think Pringle, maybe talking about Kam Pringle, maybe 3 years off to the NFL, so he might not transfer. Mazeo Bennett is more likely. But wait a second, Sam. 3 years off. I mean, you could go to 3 schools before you go to the NFL nowadays. That's how crazy things are. So Kam Pringle could transfer to a Tennessee who has proven that they can develop fantastic offensive linemen. I mean, when you talk about guys like Cooper Mays, they weren't highly rated. Jerome Carvin wasn't. Darnell Wright would be the exception. But yeah, if he's not getting developed at South Carolina, transfer to Tennessee, become a better offensive lineman, and then go to the NFL. Okay, so my report cards. Here it goes. Again, Caleb gave out all A's, literally. It was the only thing he had to do is use the minus button or the plus button or the blank button, because they were all A's because Tennessee's offense was so good. So you tell me if I'm too high, too low. I had defensive line at a B. I want to get through these before I tell you how stupid Florida is. Defensive line, a B. Thoughts?
Honestly, I actually think you're too low. I think it's a B plus. And the reason I say B plus is you mentioned them being second in rush defense to Georgia in the SEC, which is really good. But you gave the caveat that it was affected by Vols opponents having to throw a lot. But even efficiency numbers, they were even better. Tennessee was second in yards allowed per rush. They only gave up 3.28 yards. That's good for number 11 in the country. So I'm going to go B plus on that.
Fair enough. I had linebackers, and you can check this out on offthehooksports.com. I had linebackers at a C minus.
I'm with you on that. I think they had so many issues in coverage. They were awful in coverage. So really their effectiveness was based on Tim Banks being smart in how he designed his blitz packages. That was pretty much it.
Agreed. And you had Aaron Beasley make some plays towards the end. Regardless of what happened before the South Carolina game, I thought the entire season with Jeremy Banks was a bit disappointing. Defensive backs, a D.
Yeah, I'm going F. I'm sorry, I'm going F. And honestly, I think I'm being unfair to Trayvon Flowers because I think Trey Flowers is actually good, but he was covering for just massive failures elsewhere, just massive shortcomings.
So overall defensive grade, I gave a C plus. I got a feeling you're going to go a little bit lower.
Yeah, I'm going to go C minus. I think that sometimes a unit can be so bad that they bring the overall grade down, and that was the second. Just the cornerbacks. Again, I want to target. I don't think the safeties were as bad. I think the cornerback play was just god awful this year.
No, I agree. So overall, I got a C plus. You would go what? C minus, D?
Yeah, I'd go C minus. I'd be higher on the defensive line and lower in the secondary.
Big Orange Phillies and Maynardville Pike, great place to hang out. And we're going to get to the whole Florida issue with it, that they haven't figured out how to pay their players, or they've lied to their players. So Big Orange Phillies is on Maynardville Pike, close to Maynardville, close to North Knoxville. So you can get all your bros, go down there and hang out. You can get all your fam and hang out because it is a family-friendly environment. They've got billiards, darts, Big Orange Phillies. You will love them absolutely on Maynardville Pike. It's close to everything in North Knoxville. So you're going to notice we go a little bit longer from time to time, and we're going to do that. And the reason is, I want to talk about this Florida situation. And in case you haven't been tuned in over the weekend, Florida apparently doesn't understand the concept of NIL because it is very important for you, if you make a promise of NIL cash, to actually pay that. It's kind of like the Seinfeld episode, and you take a car reservation. Sure, you can take the reservation all day long, but that's really not the most important aspect of the transaction. The most important aspect of the transaction is having the car there. And I've been down this road. That is the most important thing. So if you make a promise of X amount of dollars, it's very important to have the money there. So this tells you this is as big a buffoonery as the whole Greg Schiano thing. This is every bit as embarrassing and hurtful to Florida's program as what Tennessee went through with Jeremy Pruitt, giving people money, players money when he wasn't allowed to yet. This is something that is going to continue to haunt Florida for at least one recruiting cycle, if not two, if not three. If I'm a Florida kid and I want to stay in state and I get promises of NIL money from Miami and Florida State and Florida, I'm not going to be a Gator because I'm pretty scared about what I have seen, because the Gator Collective is about as dependable as Southwest Airlines. I just believe that this hurts Florida for a long, long time. And let me give a little bit of background. He shows up on campus, Jaden Rashada, and he'd be a long time Miami lean/quiet commit. And Florida talks him out of it. He shows up. He's supposed to get $13 million, and it's not there. And you could say, well, maybe he's on a payment plan like a GMC Yukon. No, doesn't really work like that, because he could show up, suffer an injury, and then he's out the $13 million. He could show up and be terrible. Doesn't matter. You promised him the $13 million. Same thing with Nico. Nico apparently is very happy. He's getting his cash. He showed up at a function right after signing day, the early signing day. Caleb, how disastrous is this for Florida recruiting, especially by Billy Napier, supposed to be detail oriented? Good gracious, I heard that all through SEC Media Days. This is a fiasco.
Yeah, I agree. As a matter, well, let's get to that. Billy Napier's selling point, like you said, was he was the CEO of a program. He can run the program like an organized CEO. He's not doing that, guys. There have been a lot of disasters already with Florida. And this is the biggest one, and this is embarrassing. And I pulled up On 3. This was last year, right before the season started. The top 5 most ambitious NIL initiatives. Spire Sports Group with Tennessee was number 1. That's why we're all big believers in Tennessee's future, because of NIL. Florida's Gator Collective was number 5. They have the 5th largest NIL initiative, and they can't even get their money right on what to pay players. And you brought up a huge point. I've said for a while, one of the problems at a place like Florida or a place like Texas, where they're in fertile recruiting states, is yes, those states are fertile, but you're competing with a lot of schools. You're competing with Florida State. You're competing with Miami. You're about to compete with UCF, which is about to be Power 5. And for the record, I don't know if people know this, UCF's the largest school in the state of Florida by far.
It's kind of in the wrong place.
Orlando?
I guess that is. I'm thinking of South Florida. Sorry, South Florida is in Tampa, which makes no sense. That's not
yes, exactly. Central Florida's in Orlando, and South Florida's in Tampa.
Central Florida's fine. It's in muggy, hellish Orlando.
Yeah, but current Tennessee athletic director Danny White built an epic stadium there. I think they're gonna have like a pool in the back, like a part of the state. It's going to be a cool stadium. So Central Florida is a program of the future. There's a lot of people to compete with. Miami has the 2nd largest NIL initiative. It's not even a group. It's John Ruiz. I don't know who that is. Apparently, he's an attorney that's worth a few $1 billion that just throws money at people. And so,
well, I thought he was the dude that got in a little bit of trouble, but I don't want to say
not
that.
Nevin Shapiro.
Oh, Nevin Shapiro. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. So Miami has the second largest NIL initiative. Florida has the fifth. Florida's NIL initiative is a massive embarrassment now. They need to recruit some South Florida speed to be the powerhouse program that you expect Florida to be. You think they're going to be getting kids out of Miami anytime soon after this happened?
No.
Yeah.
You think that, and how about, the other place they love to recruit is North Carolina. The previous coaches, despite their win-loss record or lack thereof, had great success in North Carolina. You think those guys are going to go there? You think those guys from even if they try to get into South Carolina are going to go there? This is huge. I mean, this will have an impact on their signing day coming up, the second signing day, which I know is minuscule compared to the first signing day, but it's going to have an effect on their signing day for at least one recruiting cycle, if not more. This is a monstrous disaster by the University of Florida. And I'll say this, I don't know where you're getting your figures from, but I was told about a year ago that they were really behind. And it sounds like to me, based off your figures and what I was told a year ago, that they cobbled stuff together and inflated their numbers, which
That's
would
exactly
explain,
what they did.
yeah, which would explain why they can't pay the kid $13 million.
This is like what we call on Wall Street, we would call this fraud. This is somebody cooking their books to inflate their stock. This is what this is.
This is the Bernie Madoff of the SEC. I've been incredibly obsessed with the financial crash of 2008 for some reason. I've watched like 4 documentaries over the past few days. But the absolute worst at the center of it was Bernie Madoff. He never even made one investment with the $62 billion he took in. He did not make one investment for any of his clients from 88 to 2008. He just spent it all. So I don't know what they're spending money on in Gainesville. Perhaps it's jorts. Perhaps it's hair gel. I don't know. But if it's one of those, if it's one of those two things, it ain't Jaden Rashada. And I just am still stunned how that shook out. How you could have that first meeting, okay, and say, Jaden, we got a little problem. We weren't planning on giving you the money till then. And he says, well, I'm going to walk if you don't give me the money. Then you find a way to get the money in the next 48 hours. You think if something went south with Nico, let's just say, for instance, Pilot was the Nico guy. Okay, let's just for instance, and I don't think that's the case. And Pilot sold out to Casey's, which they have, and they're no longer involved. The University of Tennessee would have the wherewithal to be able to find the cash to pay Nico what they had promised him. Florida does not. I
got a story. I just read more into this while we were talking because I did the list on the NIL initiatives. Dave, what you said is exactly right. You ready for this story on how they pull their NIL together?
Yes.
So sports attorney and NIL pioneer Darren Heltner received a message from former Florida baseball player Eddie Rojas on July 1st last summer. Rojas was responsible for cobbling together a bunch of boosters to have the 5th largest NIL collective. They started that on July 1st. This article came out in August. How in the world did they just out of the blue in 1 month have the 5th largest NIL collective? That's not possible unless they weren't thinking things through and just threw it together.
Here's the other thing to remember. This is just simple socioeconomic demographics. Florida was a nobody in the 80s and before. So let's say the people that are my age that were in their 20s in the 90s watching the Tennessee-Florida series. So they should be in buying positions in their mid-40s at this point. But there's just not going to be as many of them. I mean, Tennessee and Alabama and Georgia, they go back 50, 100 years. So there's Haslams floating around out there that are 70 plus years old. There's all kinds of people that feel a greater tug, a greater pull to to the University of Tennessee than there is Florida. Let's not forget, in the grand scheme of things, Florida is still at the kids' table. I know that sounds crazy with Urban Meyer and Steve Spurrier and what they did, but they're still at the kids' table in terms of programs in the SEC.
And not only that, they didn't really emerge until Miami really fell off in the 90s, because Miami started to get in some trouble by then. And that's when Spurrier was able to get some South Florida kids to run his fun and gun. Also, Florida, Dave, we talk about this a lot too, on whether or not you can be a program that just recruits talent or has a cutting edge offense. It has to be creative. Florida, despite being in Florida, has to be creative. They've won their 3 national titles with coaches running an offense that the SEC hadn't caught up with yet. All 3 national titles were because of that. And I don't think Florida is a school that can do the standard pro style offense, uncreative, focus on defense and loading up on talent. They can't do what Alabama and Georgia can do because there's too much competition in that state. Which, by the way, that's why South Carolina is in trouble, because you shouldn't be hiring NFL offensive coordinators to coach your program. You need a creative offense, Shane Beamer. Sorry.
No, I agree. I mean, the argument would be that they can get you ready for the NFL, but you're right. They can build something special in defense just based off talent. But that's why I thought Dan Mullen was a perfect fit there, and apparently I was wrong, although I'm told he got a bit of a raw deal there because he was an offensive mind. So basically you just fill in the defensive talent, and he's able to get people open. I did not realize that his offense was so simplistic because I didn't watch a lot of Mississippi State, just to be real honest with you. Vols
he was the brains behind Urban Meyer.
What's that?
He was the brains behind Urban Meyer's success at Florida in the 2000s.
He was. No doubt about it. Vols Automotive Group, the epicenter of car buying there in the Knoxville area. It's on Calhoun. You'll love Vols Automotive Group. Just phenomenal, man. Vols Automotive Group, they want, they need, and they appreciate your business. And the best part about it is you're being treated fairly. Same thing with their service department. You're not going to go in and say, I think my starter's out. And they say, oh, you need a whole new engine. That's not the way they work. Vols Automotive Group, they want, they need, and they appreciate your business. So I wonder if this stuff starts to crop up elsewhere, or if Florida is just the worst. I mean, right now, if you had to rank them, Florida is the absolute worst NIL program in the history of man, because they didn't have it put together 8 months ago, and now that they supposedly have it put together, they can't make their payment.
Well, this is chickens coming home to roost. We know from the Urban Meyer days, Florida is a program that just does not care about things that you should be caring about. With Urban Meyer, it was, we don't care if our players are murderers or criminals or threatening to kill their girlfriends or trying to, in Brandon Spike's case, blind a player on the field, trying to gouge his eyes out. and
I know that we have a lot of Tennessee fans, and I guess Sam, who was saying I was just trying to poke the bear to get people more interested, which, again, I don't do. I'll tell you this. I was following a prospect recently because his recruiting was getting kind of interesting. He was thinking about Tennessee, and I was following it. And he went to Florida before he visited Tennessee. And Caleb, he took his phone and did kind of a panoramic shot of Florida's workout facility. No joke. I could, if I wanted to invest the money, could add on to my house and have a better workout facility than Florida had compared to Tennessee's. And I don't know if you've seen it in person, but the new one, there's just no comparison.
Well, Florida right now is where Tennessee was in the 70s, which is funny because Tennessee's the older program. But Tennessee in the 70s was, remember, they were, don't you know, we're Tennessee. We don't need facilities. We don't need lights at Neyland Stadium, which they refused to put in until the 70s. And I heard stories that when Johnny Majors got to Tennessee, I mean, he sacrificed years of winning to make sure the facilities were up to snuff because he was really upset about the situation that they had just not cared for years. And so we got to give Johnny Majors some credit on this. Johnny Majors actually was the one who really committed Tennessee to getting ahead of the curve and recruiting nationally, building up-to-date facilities, and building and increasing their stadium size. And they, in the 90s, that's what helped them. Other schools kind of caught up in the 2000s, but Tennessee's always tried to stay ahead of the curve now on facilities and things like that ever since then.
Okay. You have to write that column at some point. I want to read that because for those that don't know, they're just tuning in. Caleb is the most incredible person in Tennessee football history that's ever been. So I mean, you really are. You know, the difference is Johnny Majors was a beloved son. College football, the money had not gotten outrageous, so you could hang with the Johnny Majors, which they arguably did too long. You could
Yes.
hang with him and let him grow it. You can't pay a guy like a Napier, whatever he's getting paid, 5-6 million, whatever it is. You can't pay a guy that much money, and he's not a beloved son of Florida, and wait for him to fix things. You're not going to do that. So you go from Meyer had his own issues. You go from a Meyer, a Zook, a Mullen, and now a Napier. How does Florida get better? How do they build things? I mean, Steve Spurrier, when he went to South Carolina, he hated these things, but he went to all these groups and all these booster groups, and he got their facilities upgraded overnight. Are you telling me Billy Napier, with the way he carries himself, he walks into a booster club and somebody says, I got to throw $100 million at that guy? Heck no.
No, nobody's going to do that with Billy Napier. You're right. He's going to have to schmooze the boosters and golf with the boosters. And you're right. And that was Johnny Majors' best selling point, was Johnny Majors did not care what Tennessee boosters thought. He was not going to kowtow to them. And he kind of had the leverage to do that for a long time. And you're right. Billy Napier he's going to have to beg for that support. And I'm with you. I'm seeing a lot, I think they thought they were getting Nick Saban. I'm seeing a lot more Derek Dooley than Nick Saban and Billy Napier.
Well, I'm not seeing any Nick Saban and Billy Napier. The thing about Johnny Majors is he was great with the boosters because he would only go 2 cocktails deep. It was after that in the late 90s or late 80s and early 90s where he would get 4 or 5 cocktails deep and tell the boosters what he really thought about them. And then that went in a different direction. God rest his soul. I love that man. The only person I called coach my whole life, because the other guys aren't my coach.
And let's not forget the credibility Majors had, not just as Tennessee's favorite son, but he had just won a national championship at Pitt when he got hired. So he had the credibility as a coach and as a beloved son. It would be like if Tim Tebow for Florida, if Tim Tebow becomes a head coach and wins a national title somewhere, and then they hire him, he's got 20 years of goodwill before they even come close to firing him.
Portions of the program brought to you by Vassy Lawn and Garden. Man alive, it's worth a drive. If you need that industrial mower, then they can get it to you, whether or not we're talking about from Knoxville, Nashville, Chattanooga. They have it all in Cleveland, and thanks to their buying power, if you're starting any sort of company or you have a company where you need industrial mowers, they have that. They have commercial mowers and residential mowers as well. And City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com. They're phenomenal. Integrity matters. They're going to take care of your HVAC unit. You never have to worry about them suggesting more than you actually need. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. We'll see you at 10 o'clock Eastern time each and every weekday morning. A lot on the program today as we're going to get a further breakdown on Nico and how he performed on Friday night, and we'll have hoops as well. So a lot going on. Have a fantastic day, everyone. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. This is a presentation